Hey, what's going on? It's Jeff Newpert from ChasingStrength.com. And in today's video, we are answering the question, when do you switch to the double kettlebell exercises? Let me ask you a question. Have you ever wondered when the best time to make the switch from single kettlebell exercises to double kettlebell exercises are, right? If so, you are definitely not alone, my friend, since for many guys, the double kettlebell work really gets you faster results. And as a result, most guys want to get there as soon as possible. For example, I got this email from Josh the other day, and in it, he asked 3 exceptionally perceptive questions. He said, when do you switch to double kettlebells, right? What are the metrics and what should the step down be? For example, I can do 10 sets of 5 with a 40-pound kettlebell. Should I step down to 35-pound double kettlebell? Currently doing the Giant 1.0, so the focus is the strong enough standards. Okay, so here is what I told him. I said, I generally prescribe the following, okay? And with the 24, I suggest 1 hand swings for 10 sets of 10. With the Turkish get-up, I suggest 10 sets of 1 on each side. Okay, so it's not 1 rest, then another. It's 1 followed immediately by 1 on the other side. And then for the single kettlebell clean and press, I recommend 10 sets of 5 and 5. Again, not resting between sides, but 1 side immediately following the other side. Okay, and then optional is you snatch 5 and 5 for 10 sets with the 24. Okay, hope that helps. But what I did forget to include in my email to Josh was recommendations for the Goblet Squat. So a simple recommendation when using the Goblet Squat is 10 sets of 10 reps with the 24. That I've found generally provides a nice solid base for most guys. Now, what I also forgot, terrible customer service, I know. Sorry about that, Josh, if you're watching this video. What I also forgot was how do you include, or how do you implement, rather, the double kettlebells into your training program? Now, for some, this is not so simple. So typically, here's how I advise you do this, okay? Once you can get the clean and press for 10 sets of 5 right followed immediately by 5 left, okay? And if you're lefty dominant, left then right, okay? It doesn't matter as long as it's one side followed by the other. Then what you're going to do is you're going to step down 1 full size kettlebell, okay, for a pair of kettlebells the next size lower. All right. So what I mean by that is you're not going to go from a single 24 to a pair of 20s. Rather, you're going to go from a single 24 to a pair of 16s. Now, why are you going to do that? Well, for 2 reasons: technique acquisition and technique management. Well, now, what does that mean exactly? Well, it's pretty simple. The double kettlebell techniques, although based on the single kettlebell techniques, are actually different from them. So, for example, you are going to have to use a wider stance, right? A wider base for double kettlebell lifts than the single kettlebell lifts. Why? Because you got 2 kettlebells that are passing between your legs instead of just 1. Okay. And as a result, that means there's a shorter stroke, or the distance the kettlebells are traveled from beneath the body to wherever you're trying to get them to, which is in the clean and press is typically the rack position first and foremost, okay? Now, what about when you put the weight overhead? Well, you've reduced what we call your degrees of freedom. What that means is with a single kettlebell press, you can lean sideways, right? So if I got a press here, I can lean sideways, okay? I can lean backwards, and I can rotate a little bit, okay? I can do all 3 of them at one time. That's degrees of freedom. And so to continue with our single kettlebell press example, it is way more forgiving if you have shoddy technique, right? Not so the double kettlebell press. You can't lean sideways unless you want to hurt your shoulder, or hurt your lower back. And you can't rotate unless you want to hurt your lower back. And that only leaves leaning backwards, right? That's what you can, quote unquote, get away with. And that's only if you have strong abs and you know how to use your technique to protect your lower back. All right. Now, similarly, people are taught, many people, in fact, I don't know if I'd say most people, but for a while there, most people were taught to sit back on a goblet squat, kind of like a powerlifting squat, right? So you're like sitting back, reaching back for a curb or a chair with your butt. Now, you can get away with this with a goblet squat because you can bend your arms and use the kettlebell, as a counterbalance, but you cannot sit back on a double kettlebell front squat. Why not? Well, the kettlebells will fold you in half and you'll end up dumping them on the ground. And worse yet, you may strain your lower back in the process. So in both of these cases, and in fact, other cases too, you'll want the load or the weight of the kettlebells light enough so you can move the kettlebells with good technique instead of the load being so heavy, completing a rep is the only thing you can think of. And the focus on your technique goes out the window. All right. Does this make sense so far? All right. So how do you achieve the above guidelines? All right. Now, assuming you have better things to do than scour the internet for breadcrumbs on how to put a plan together, and you want to skip the trial and error phase of building your own plan, I'll leave a link to what I call an everything all at once program in the video description below. Okay. It's a program that includes 2-hand swings, 1-hand swings, TGUs, goblet squats, rows, even rows with kettlebell, cleans, presses, snatches, and more. And if you want to follow in Jason's footsteps and start with the Giant 1.0, I'll leave a link to that in the video description below. And finally, if you know that you're ready to make the jump from single kettlebell to double kettlebell training, I'll leave a link to my Kettlebell Strong double kettlebell training course that uses what I call technique stacking. And that helps you learn and master the double kettlebell skills faster than normal. All right, I'll leave a link to that also in the video description below. So hopefully this video gives you a clear path on how to progress from single kettlebells to double kettlebells and why the techniques are different. If you found this video helpful, click the like button, smash the subscribe button, share with a friend you know who's using kettlebells and wants to make that leap from single to double, and leave me a comment in the video comment section below. What's your experience been making the transition from singles to doubles? Are you there yet? And do you want to get there? And if so, again, what have your results been? Okay. Until next time, my friend, stay strong.